for truth.
Welcome to Duality Check, the podcast where two brothers embark on a journey through the realms of scientific inquiry, the mysteries of the past, and the uncharted frontiers of spirituality. Join us as we explore the wonders of our world and beyond, all while embracing the roles of curious bystanders rather than experts. Together, we'll unravel the tapestry of existence, blending the dichotomies of knowledge and wonder. Get ready to question, ponder, and delve into the dualities that shape our understanding of reality on Duality Check. I'm Drew.
And I'm Dean, and welcome to episode 39.
Yeah.
Today's episode, I finished reading Lue Elizondo's new book, Imminent.
Imminent, that was the name.
Yeah. And we're going to go over that. It'll probably be split into 3 or 4 episodes, depending.
How many chapters is that book?
It's like 20. But not all the stuff necessarily needs total coverage on the show. Kind of want to keep it to some of the more important stuff, I think.
I'm sure some of it's stuff we've talked about too, right? Or we've heard him say, or...
Yeah, well, some of this stuff is stuff I'm sure we've heard about before. I know I have. But not all of it have we necessarily talked about on the show. And his take on certain things is pretty interesting sometimes. So
cool. Yeah, I wanted to start out. I have a couple of, I'm calling it now the weekly dose of Bashar. Because I like, some of it's kind of inspirational, some of it's this and that. But I also like his take on some of the past, and even one of these is about the Pyramids of Giza, and then I think the other one is more about him, like their Bashar's like race, and
interesting,
and more about like their
like where
civilization a bit. Yeah, this first one's more about the pyramids though, and I think it would be interesting.
All right, well, let's get into it.
Please, why were the pyramids made?
Well, the original pyramids were made for a variety of functions. Number one, it was made as a hall of records to demonstrate that there are changes that happen on your planet in cycles, such as precession and certain kinds of cyclic ages that create certain kinds of different conditions on your planet, so that by reading the pyramids, especially the Great Pyramid, in the proper way, you will understand the cycles and can be better prepared for them on your planet. But the Great Pyramid in particular was also designed to function in a way that when you go into the king's chamber and lie in the stone coffer, it has been designed geometrically. When you go into what is called the brainwave frequency of gamma, to amplify that gamma state and allow for greater opportunity and acceleration to create the experience of astral travel. That's what a lot of the ancient Egyptian priest initiates learned to do in the Great Pyramid, so that they would go and gather information while having an out-of-body experience and bring that information back to improve the knowledge of the society. That's another reason it was created.
Can you tell me...
And I've heard both those positions on, obviously, the mathematics for the...
Right.
People have stated that the mathematics for the dimensions of the pyramid kind of lay out the precession and somewhat.
Yeah, so the pyramid, the proportions of it are such that the height to like the width represents like the polar radius versus the circumference.
So yeah.
Like if you were to expand it up in size so that the tip of the pyramid touched this, like, and put it inside the earth so that the tip touched the North Pole, the corners would lay on the equator.
Oh yeah.
But I think what he means about showing the cycles is that the 3 pyramids they say are laid out like the stars in Orion's belt, and they sort of point to a time when Orion's belt lined up with them perfectly in the sky,
which kind of gives you the enough of the astronomy and the mathematics to be able to show that there's a reason that it's in a different position. So then you discover that there's a precession, right?
Yeah. Well, right. So it would tell you that there's a precession, and if you look at the time when they line up, it would theoretically tell you that, like, they're pointing to a date with how it was built and laid out.
Right.
But yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of the pyramids as a big meditation chamber theory.
Yeah, I've heard that one before.
The main reason I'm not is because it doesn't seem designed for humans to move through.
Right.
Like, have you ever seen people like go into
they're
it?
crawling and they're shimmying up these like ramps and stuff.
They like built all these like stairs in it because it's just such an exhausting experience going up there. And even with the stairs, like you're like crouched.
Yep.
I mean, maybe that's part of like some sort of like how we talk about in like Secret History and stuff, like some sort of like test or some sort of thing that you have to go through.
Some sort of physical thing you have to overcome in order to,
But that doesn't explain like necessarily the weirdness of all the shafts and stuff, the hidden chamber.
He did say the original pyramid, so that I caught first time I listened to it was that he said the original, and it almost seems like there may have been iterations, or and if we know whoever, I mean, it's likely that whoever built the pyramids had far greater knowledge of construction than we originally gave them credit for. So the fact that there could have been an original design and purpose before what we see, or that it does have different ability, like there's a way for them to change certain things about it to have different functions. He said 3, but he didn't say there was. Didn't he say there was three functions?
Well, 3
of the pyramid.
No, I thought he said it was the 2 main functions.
Maybe it was only 2. I thought he said 3 and only gave us 2.
Maybe. What's his name? Christopher Dunn.
Yeah,
I'm more and more partial to his
theory,
research.
The electricity.
Well, just that it's some sort of machine. He thinks
some sort of generator.
It's like a generator.
Yeah,
I'm not necessarily sold on that, but like his arguments that it's a machine seem to hold.
Yeah, it's definitely the most compelling to me. I mean, the idea that the 3 of them in a row could be some sort of like they all having different aspects of a whole. That once all 3 of them are going, all 3 of the pyramids are going, then it might create some sort of effect.
Yeah, that's some sort of reactor. It's an interesting idea, I think. But I've heard that it could be a machine that is designed to enhance someone's like visionary abilities too. So who knows?
And actually, the next one that I have lined up isn't the one about.
He said Hall of Records.
Yeah, he said it's a Hall of Records based on
trying to show the cycles, right?
And not just cycles, but other phenomena too, just so that we're ready for it. What he's saying is like,
right?
Maybe it even tells you when the next comet's gonna hit, or whatever. Like there might be messages encoded within the geometries of the pyramid that we just don't know. Like there's still things that we're discovering about it.
Right. Like
so,
the
other shafts that we're finding and stuff.
The Scan Pyramids project with the new chamber above the king's or above the Grand Gallery that's about the size of the Grand Gallery.
Yeah, I can imagine like there being other relationships between different aspects of it that we might be able to encode or decode. But in this next one that I have lined up, it's not about their civilization. This one is. I did have another one, but I wanted to do this one because I know you were working on lucid dreaming, and then he talks about it in this one.
Oh, cool! All right.
One very strong permission slip that can work for many of you in helping you to create lucidity in your dreams, which means waking up in the dream and knowing that you were dreaming and then suddenly realizing that you're creating the dream, you're in control of it, and then further allowing yourself to recognize that physical reality is also a dream and that you can become lucid in the physical reality dream will allow you to experience very magical things and changes in your physical reality. This is what our civilization did, is we woke up in the dream state and then realized that physical reality was also another form of dream state and woke up in that, and so we stayed in the lucid dream. That's why we don't sleep anymore. We're always awake and we're always dreaming simultaneously. Now, this little permission slip that we're going to share with you this day is the idea that when you're dreaming, obviously you know that many different kinds of things can happen that if they had actually happened in physical reality would make you stop and take notice. But in the dream state, you kind of accept almost anything that happens as natural or normal.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yes, exactly.
So what you need to do is you need to create a device, something, that will absolutely stand out in the dream in such a way as to remind you that you actually are dreaming, if you see it in the dream. You understand?
I do.
So what you need to do is use your artistic abilities to create some shape, some image. It can be a drawing, it can be a sculpture, it can be whatever you wish it to be. But the first part of it, it's a two-part idea. The first part of it is that it is something that you really need to identify uniquely with, strongly with, uniquely, that is really unique to you. Very specifically to some attribute that you know is really unique to you. And work that into this drawing, this image, this object, whatever it is, so that when you recognize it, you will know it has your unique mark, that no one else would have made that. You follow me so far?
I do.
Now, the second part of it is once that's done, you need to attach to it, whether again in drawing form or physical form, doesn't matter, you need to attach to it something, just one thing, one symbolic thing that is representative of something you absolutely do not prefer.
Oh, geez.
You follow me? Absolutely would never prefer. Because what this does is it works together in a very specific way. Because again, if you just use the side that's unique to you, that really represents you, you might still accept it just as something familiar in the dream and just integrate it right into your dream. But if it contains that one little thing that is something you do not prefer, then you'll get that instant snap, that rebound, that polarity shift, where you go, me, no, not me, not me, not me. It woke you up in the dream. You understand?
Yes.
So it's kind of a combination of a way to use polarity to snap yourself awake in the dream and become lucid. So just use your imagination and your creativity on this and see what happens. All right?
Great. Thank you so much.
Does that help you?
Yes, it does.
Oh, thank you so much. So,
Oh, thank you so much.
He does that a lot. It's funny because a lot of times when somebody will ask him a good question that he like is wanting to answer, he'll be like, "Oh, thank you, before he even answers it. He's like, "Oh, thank you." And usually, like, I've watched the whole session before. This is a while ago, but in the beginning, Daryl, the channeler, talks, and he's like, "So this is what you can expect from this session," and he kind of lays out all of the different things. Maybe we'll have to watch one of these like the whole full thing one time, but and then he lays out like the little idiosyncrasies that Bashar has and like what they mean and like why he's doing it. It's just so that people aren't asking questions about those things during it, and wasting time just by So he, like, one of those things is like when he gets excited about answering a question, he goes, "Oh, thank you." You know, he gets really animated about it. But yeah, I like Bashar, even if you don't believe in it, even if you don't.
Yeah,
because
even though thought provoking.
Yeah, and a lot of this information you could probably find from a scientist, but they're not very good at communicating it. You know what I mean? Like, and the thing is a lot of times when he's on stage like this, it's just people coming up to a mic and asking him questions. So it's really interesting how, if this is fake, let's just say if this is fake and he's not channeling, the amount of preparation he would have to do and the amount of knowledge he would have to just pull all of this different information from all these different aspects of people's of life. And like, I mean, people are asking him questions about all sorts of things, and he's able to really connect it. And if he doesn't answer it directly, he answers it in such a way that helps people to understand why the question that they're asking is not the right question. And so he like, or if they are asking a question that's like, they're not asking a question about this, so you're really asking a question about this, and then the people are like, well, yeah, I think that's really what I'm trying to, because a lot of people will come to people like this or anything with a question, a surface level question about what they're really. But the problem that they're really having
on the edge of what they really want to know.
Yeah, because like the problem they're really having is not the question. Like the question is not going to get to it, but he can kind of see through that and like gets to what they're really struggling with. And it's kind of interesting watching the dynamic because it's just people coming up and questioning. And like, some of these people are just really emotional, and they come because they need some sort of guidance and help with their own personal lives and stuff. And so some of it can be like self-helpy and preachy and like this and that, but it doesn't come off that way. So it's definitely worth looking into if you've never watched something like this.
Well, find one that
I'll find
you
one.
like a lot, and we can do an episode on that.
Yeah, we'll cover it.
That'd be cool. As far as this particular one, I thought this was pretty cool. This was like I've heard the idea, like, obviously, like, everyone's seen it in Hollywood even, right, with the Inception.
I was going to say Inception, having the idol.
A totem
is
what they called it, right? Something, like he said, like
something
personal,
physical.
Something you absolutely know what it is and how it behaves. And But what wasn't in the movie, and I haven't heard before, was attaching something that
negative.
You absolutely don't prefer to it. Yeah. Like, that's interesting to, like, shock yourself awake with, like, ooh, I like this, no, I don't, type thing.
Ooh, I like this. Oh, bad. I don't. Why is that here?
Yeah, like, I want it, I don't want it. Yeah, that's interesting. Jolting yourself awake.
I thought that might be useful. I know you're going on a journey.
Yeah, while I'm talking about it.
Yeah.
It's one thing that's honestly, I gotta put it more in practice, but
I don't know where you would even begin with that, because it's like really just sitting awake. Like, I would keep myself awake thinking about it.
Yeah.
I don't know where to begin. I don't know if the Journey to the Sacred Garden helps with that, but I didn't finish reading that one. But there's probably a lot of different ways to achieve this, but
I think so. Well, and I don't know that you're necessarily achieving the same thing, right? Like, Journey to the Sacred Garden is kind of a instruction manual on shamanism, not necessarily on lucid dreaming. So, like, lucid dreaming could probably be a component of it.
Right. But yeah, it's not the end all be all for
and those
whatever
two
you're
skills
seeking.
may like lead towards each other or assist each other, but I don't necessarily think they're the same thing.
Okay.
Because, like, in the shamanism practice, like, you're specifically doing something like almost as like a meditation while you're awake.
Right.
The idea is to not fall asleep.
I see. But maybe that could help you. Being able to have that ability and that control
Right.
could help you get to a state where you're probably, before you even get to that point, you're probably already gotten somewhat far in lucid dreaming.
What I remember in the past when I did try and like build that skill a little bit, was that there's a lot of times where you like try and put yourself in that sort of trance state and you end up falling asleep. And when you do it that way, when you kind of fall asleep under those conditions, sometimes that you can bring on really powerful dreams that way. So I think they could kind of go hand in hand in a certain way that way.
Because I, in my memory, I know I've had lucid dreams, like at least a good couple handfuls of lucid dreams. As far as how much control I had, though, it was like pockets of control.
Right. There's
like
sometimes
you don't have full control over the entirety of it, but you have pockets of control within it.
Right.
And if you actually like study and try to like learn how to do these things, I could imagine how amazing it would be to like journey through your subconscious and to like pick out all the different information that your brain's been picking up without you noticing, you know?
Right. Right. And they say that if you can, well, I've heard people say, I don't know, that like if you can really get the hang of lucid dreaming, then you're essentially like right next door to like astral travel, right? Like being able to like purposely go out of your body and like visit places in the real world, like exit the dreamscape.
So you're back to, and that's kind of what he was mentioning there too, where like his people have mastered this already, and so now they're waking and dream states are one. So they don't sleep; they are constantly in a dream state where their lives are. They live their physical lives in the same state as when they're in their dream state. So they're able to affect their physical reality through the dreams. And it might be to the point where they're just astral projecting all over the place, right? Like instead of going to sleep, they're just astral projecting, and they're able to go and still interact with all the different beings as if they were awake. Yeah. So their physical body may be asleep, but they don't feel like they're sleeping ever.
I wonder what the physiology of that would be for humans, you know, like, because, you know, you always hear like how important sleep is for health. So if you
where do we hear that from
somehow, well, for sure. But I mean, obviously there's a story to it, and there's also an experience to it, right?
Of course, like, yeah. You know that when you go days and days even a day without sleep, especially as you get older, it's rough.
But we've also all had the experience of, you know, feeling like crap, getting a good night's sleep, and waking up feeling amazing in the morning, like,
or even like sleeping too long and feeling like crap.
Right.
Like there's all these different things that you could feel from sleep. And it brings me to the thought of like how the Secret History of the World talks about a lot of these mystery religion or mystery schools that do all these sleep deprivation to help them get into to whatever state they're trying to achieve. Sleep deprivation, I've felt it before, where you've gone a full, 24, maybe even more hours of just being awake. I've gone like 36 hours, I think was like the most I've ever gone being awake when I was
I've done a full 2 days before.
Yeah, mine was pretty close to that. I think I fell asleep in like it was just after, anyway. But like you start to like slightly start hallucinating at a certain point, like where light is entering your brain differently. So like shadows and like smearing of light, and like you start to see different things, and you start attributing to them what otherwise would not have been attributable, like you wouldn't have seen these hazes around things, like there's just little things that like while you're awake you start to notice, and that's the type of stuff you see when you're dreaming, because your brain's like, I'm supposed to be dreaming right now, what the hell is going on? And it's probably like all these chemicals are like stirring in your brain.
Well, that's the reason I brought that up, the physiology, because I wonder, like, obviously there's like the materialist science version, right? And like they'll explain like the the circadian rhythms that we have, and like the body's need to go offline so it can redo connections in the brain, and so that it can repair things that it can't do while you're up and about. But I wonder if the body is actually seeking dreaming, like if it actually is for somehow.
For
like
some
that,
reason,
the dreaming or the meditative state of dreaming that you need. So
it's very
like,
important.
I wonder if you were good enough at lucid dreaming, like if you could meditate well enough and purposefully enough, like if that could replace sleep.
Yeah, like, well, in a sense, like what I'm imagining when he's telling us like that his people don't need sleep at all, I'm imagining that they don't experience sleep the way we do. Yeah. Sleep might still be to them keeping your body still for a time where the body can heal while the mind still goes about. So like all of these different things that our brain does to heal and to recuperate and to maintain these connections, right? You could still be doing if you're lucid dreaming. Maybe it's a task. Like as you get better at it, it's one of the first things you check off. Get all the hard stuff done first. You know, like they say when you're trying to make a schedule, you get all the hard stuff done first and then work on the small things. So the first thing you do when you go into your state of dreaming, which is really not dreaming to them, it's just another state of awareness where their body's still, but their mind is off doing its own thing, or their spirit or whatever it might be. But their body and their physical aspects of that are still recuperating somewhere, but they're astrally projecting themselves somewhere else.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're in that dream state and their body's still recuperating, but it's not dreaming to them, or it's not being asleep
Their
to
consciousness is never necessarily shutting off.
Right.
It's always engaged in something, even if they're giving their body a break, per se. It reminds me of the Doctor Strange movie. Remember when he learns how to astral project?
Yep.
And then, because he's like obsessed with learning the craft, right? Mm-hmm. And then once he learns how to astral project, as he dreams, he pops his spirit out and he keeps reading.
Yeah, while his body is physically sleeping or laying down or whatever.
Right.
Your mind can still be racing, and it does. We all know that while you sleep, your mind is racing. It's not like your mind shuts off.
Well, if
it's your consciousness that is being nullified.
If the mind as an antenna theory is real, then, you know, maybe that antenna can sort of shut off if your consciousness exits the body and give your body a chance to go into like
take a break,
a stasis repair mode.
But, yeah, that's interesting. But yeah, that was your weekly dose of Bashar, and I'll look for something, one of his full conferences or whatever they call them.
Cool.
We'll have to cover it.
All right. Well, let's take our first break,
okay,
and we'll come back and cover some Lue Elizondo. This is Stevie Nader, and the song's called "Chasing."
I can't take this anymore. I tried so hard to fight it. Yeah, I went out to war. I don't know what to do instead. 'Cause all I've known for so long, yeah, all I've known is dead.
right, welcome back.
Welcome back. All right, shall we dive into some Lue Elizondo?
Yeah, I'm excited for this.
All right, so I'm going to start us out in the foreword of the book, which is written by Chris Mellon.
Oh, okay.
So I've
What's his position in the government? He's like I can't remember.
He's had a number of positions, but he was like a senior defense intelligence person. He might say it in here.
He's a private equity investor, former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence in the Clinton and George W. Bush administrations, and later for the Security and Information Operations. He formerly served as the staff director of the United States Senate Select Committee on Intelligence.
Gotcha.
So yeah, he's a member of the Mellon family, which is pretty well known and pretty well to do in U.S. government and
of
history.
Carnegie Mellon fame.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Cool. All right. So he writes here, to fully appreciate the impact Lue and some of his colleagues have had on our understanding of UAP, you need to first understand the situation that existed at the time Lue began his journey. When I first met Lue at a closed-door Pentagon meeting early in 2017, the UAP issue was still regarded with unremitting contempt and disdain by the mainstream press, the scientific community, and the U.S. government. This was nothing new. The UAP issue had been mired in a quagmire of controversy, wheels futilely spinning, accusations flying since the 1940s. Admittedly, it didn't help that a parade of UAP charlatans and frauds were seeking to exploit the issue for fame and money. No matter, from 1970, when the U.S. Air Force abandoned Project Blue Book, its public relations effort to investigate and discredit UAP reports until late 2017, when Lue resigned his position on the staff of the Secretary of Defense. There was no meaningful change in either the stated position of the U.S. government or in the public perception of the UAP topic. I don't know that I totally agree with that. I think the public perception
It definitely changed.
has steadily been growing.
I think the acceptance of it has been growing. Like people are like, yeah, there's probably something to this. You know, whether they do any more investigation or learning on their own outside of that thought.
It depends on what public he's talking about, though, right?
True.
So, like, if the circles of the public that he, resides in are like academia and whatnot,
Then maybe not as much has been done. Yeah.
then for sure there's definitely been a freeze there for probably that entire time that he's talking about in the mainstream news and stuff.
But as far as the public that I'm imagining, the public me being anybody average person, the average citizen, their willingness to accept UAPs as being a real phenomenon has grown.
Right. Maybe not for everyone, but there's been like, how do I explain it? It's been like for the group who doesn't believe in UAP, they basically haven't changed during that time period.
Yeah.
But over that time period, more and more people became open to it, and the UAP acceptors and investigators have been growing.
Yeah.
Steadily.
That I agree with that. Yeah.
Anyway, he says, true, sensational press reports of UAP activity would occasionally surface. There were also some ineffectual efforts to engage Congress and even a significant but short-lived congressional earmark for UAP research. But there was no meaningful progress in recognizing the validity of the UAP issue from 1970 through 2017. Indeed, the UAP stigma was still so bad in 2017 that most commercial and military personnel were afraid to report their observations for fear of damaging their careers and reputations. Similarly, most civilian witnesses were reluctant to discuss their experiences with friends or family, much less file an official UAP sighting. Meanwhile, the handful of people at the Department of Defense, DoD, who had a serious interest in the issue were careful to conceal it from any but a few trusted friends. Prior to 2017, when DoD personnel discussed UAP, it was usually behind closed doors or in whispers.
Literal whispers.
Yeah,
people walking in the hall. About the UAPs.
Yeah, or they would go into like a skiff or whatever.
Yeah. Whispers coming out from closed doors meetings, right?
Yeah,
Little
or
snippets.
like talking about it,
A memo.
as, around a barbecue after.
After work, yeah.
Right.
I can see that too.
This climate of hostility toward the UAP issue was a direct result of the U.S. government policies formulated by CIA's Robertson panel in 1953. Claiming to fear U.S. air defense communications might be overwhelmed by UAP reports, this CIA panel advised the Air Force to enlist the Walt Disney Company and the mass media in a campaign to debunk UAP. A subsequent Air Force-funded UAP study at the University of Colorado went further, declaring the topic devoid of scientific merit. Chaired by physicist Edward Condon, it went so far as to recommend that the academic institutions ensure students could not receive academic credit for studying the UAP issue. Dr. Condon's report provided the Air Force the excuse it sought to close Project Blue Book, its controversial UFO investigation. As time passed, Air Force contempt and hostility for the UAP issue became more explicit. By 1970, despite thousands of credible, unexplained UAP reports, the Air Force disingenuously took the position that UAP were simply the result of a mild form of hysteria, individuals who fabricate reports to perpetrate a hoax or seek publicity. Psychopathological persons and misidentification of natural objects. In other words, according to the U.S. Air Force, anyone reporting UAP was either crazy, a fraud, or a fool.
Yeah, so the Condon report was the beginning of the Air Force just absolutely going full against it, when beforehand they had Blue Book, which is still a classified thing, but it was still known that they were investigating it.
It was a PR wing of UAP investigations, right? So its job was to investigate the matters, but they kept separate files for like truly unexplained and like debunked stuff. Mm-hmm. And they would only really ever present publicly the debunked stuff.
So they had all these other files that they were basically just deeming as like unexplainable, but we will explain it. And they just were ignoring it. Is that kind of the idea? Like, because there was obviously more credible reports, and then there was the stuff they were able to debunk.
My understanding is that, and I think Lue addresses this somewhere in the book, is that there was a wing of Blue Book that actually their job was to investigate the real sightings.
So there was an actual team for that.
Was ultra top secret, and those cases never made it to the public.
So Blue Book was not ultra top secret in a sense of like, you mean they had like
they had to report to Congress and to the public.
And they had scientists that people knew well enough that when they came out and said things against the UFO stuff, they're like, case closed. Let's stop talking about this, please.
Well, and then you had J. Allen Hynek, who was the head of Blue Book for a long time. When he left Blue Book, became like a UFO guy, a public UFO investigator. Not public, but a private, like individual UAP investigator, he had made statements and wrote in, I think, his book that he regretted
being a part of Blue Book.
right,
Yeah.
or being a part of the way that they handled it.
He wished he was on the team going after the real ones, and he could report on the real ones.
But I'm sure he couldn't just come out with the stuff he knew either. Because like Lue Elizondo, he was bound by national security.
Yeah, and even now, if you are a whistleblower and you don't go through official channels as far as like what type of information you're allowed to leak, you're going to be labeled as crazy immediately. So that's why you've got these new whistleblowers who understand that, and they're coming out and they're saying, yes, we have documentation, we have clear indications that the U.S. government has known about this and have been investigating this, and they have very credible reports about these things. But that's all I can say. I can't give you any more specifics.
Right.
Because until they deem it okay for me to release this information, I will tell you that they have all of these things, but I can't tell you what it is they have or anything like that.
Yeah, and you can't really blame those people either.
No, of course not.
Because like
They don't want to die. They don't want to,
they're
don't wanna go
literally
missing.
breaking like espionage and national security laws if they were to breach those confidentialities.
It's treason.
Like if you're so upset that someone doesn't just out with it, who's in one of those positions, like you're essentially asking them to martyr themselves for your knowledge, right?
Which, of course, as a person who's not going to be the martyr, you're like, yeah, just do it, dude. We all deserve it. It's like, come on, you're asking a lot of an individual. Okay,
these people have families, and
yeah, exactly.
Like even if they were totally willing to do that, like for themselves, but like if they have a family, like they're not going to be willing to do that.
And it's sad to say, like the way we're talking about it, as far as like, yeah, they'll just kill you. It's like we're at a point where that like that's realistic. We just watched a former sitting president almost be assassinated. Like, imagine what they would do to an ex-employee who's saying things that they don't want. And this is obviously I'm saying that
They could just
whimsically,
disappear you, and for the public, as far as the public knows, you were killed.
right? Yeah, I mean they can just make you basically. I mean, the internet's a crazy place now. It's hard for them to do those kind of things anymore because you can go off grid
like
and
throwing
still,
them into like an off-grid prison system somewhere.
not necessarily kill them, but
right.
Basically make it so they're dead. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
All right. So here's the next little bit.
Is this still the forward?
Yeah, this is still in the forward. As the reader may know, it is not unusual for Russian bear bombers. Oh, you know what? I've got some notes here for context. So he had mentioned the Robertson panel in the 50s.
Right.
And that was convened in 53, led by Howard Robertson. This was like one of the first like public investigations into UFOs. That was supposedly on behalf of the public. And it was meant to review Project Blue Book.
So it was taking all the Air Force's stuff and
they went and looked through the Blue Book files and then came back
stuff
with a report. But they said that UFOs were not a direct threat to national security, but posed an indirect threat by potentially overwhelming military communications. So the Robertson panel was important because essentially what it did was it provided a justification for the military to tell its people not to report this shit. They didn't want a bunch of military communications being taken up by people talking about UFOs, is how they sold it to the public. Is that it in and of itself is not a threat. We don't know what it is. But what we do know is that if we're
spending too much
time on this, like we're going to be overwhelming our radio chatter with talk about UFOs, which in and of itself is like, are you saying there's that many UFOs?
I was going to say, yeah. Are you saying that there's that much that it's going to overwhelm you? Because that's like, I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Because you got to imagine and especially from the pilots who've talked about it, like what's his name that did the David Fravor?
Yeah.
I mean, the way they talk about when they're out flying, like other than like banter when they're doing specific missions, like. I mean, unless there's a bunch of targets.
I'm talking about like a bunch of debriefing reports that are going up and all the paper pushers and the Pentagon having to file through like stacks of UFO about, like, reports ATC to get to something that's actually has like national security implications.
Okay, yeah, I was thinking like ATC, air traffic control comms through the military. Like, I mean, it could be
that too. Like, say there's some sighting moving across, and now all of a sudden, like all these pilots, all these people are like chattering up on the radio networks. Like you could paint it, you could sell it as like it's actually a danger if we take this seriously because it will like.
I mean, I see that when you're in a war zone or you're in a mission space, right? But if you're not in something like that, a report shouldn't be overwhelming you unless there's so many of them coming through that you just don't have enough manpower to sift through them all.
And if that is the case, then that's really
an admission.
Deal.
That's an admission.
That's an admission of itself, right?
Yeah.
Which means we should be checking it out.
At least they should allow. It should be to the point nowadays. I feel like we need to get to a point where these things come through and there's some sort of like ex-military civilians, right? People who are ex-military but are now civilians, like a Lue Elizondo, like all these other whistleblowers who come together and are able to do civilian reporting based on and keep their top secret clearances, right? And they're able to go between the government and the public, and they deem what is classified top secret and are still able to tell us what the hell is going on. Yeah, we saw 3 UFOs today. Nothing crazy happened. We just wanted to make sure everybody knew. You know, there's a couple of them off the coast of off the East Coast. There's a couple of them down in the Gulf. You know, there's there's some of them being reported down on the West Coast in San Diego. Right. Like, this is what's happened today, and then send out the civilian investigators to go and do a more in-depth.
Right.
Try to get some of the actual footage or interviews with the people who saw them and all these kind of things, so we can come together and then you have a civilian's report on every incident.
Well, that's essentially what groups like MUFON and stuff are, that they do.
It's what they want to do, at least, right?
It's you can go on MUFON's website and look up. There's just listings and listings and listings of reports, and you can read them.
But I mean, to have to be able to have the technology like the government has, like the military has, seeing these things and be able to verify these sightings, because you can get
that's where like from Avi Loeb comes in with his Galileo project, and like he's essentially trying to set up a sensor system that watches for this stuff across the globe.
Yeah, that would be nice. That would be nice. And then you have a full civilian brigade of people working on it and synthesizing that information, right?
But I'm sure there's been some meetings with government and military about the Galileo project, because I'm sure they have concerns for their ability to track military movements and whatnot. And so I'm sure they've had to sign certain non-disclosures and whatnot.
Well, and also probably having to make sure that there's no foreign actors working within the Galileo project, right? So if they come across information
Avi
that
Loeb
they could relate. Yeah, no, he's foreign, right?
I don't know if he's a U.S. citizen, but I know he wasn't born in the U.S.
Yeah.
Anyway, the really big thing about the Robertson panel, though, was that its recommendations were to essentially create a public disinformation campaign.
After they went through all of the
and as he said here, like they hired the Walt Disney Company to try and discredit UFOs.
And mass media,
Yeah. Which I think is kind of the start of this whole like big sci-fi UFO.
When was the Robertson panel?
53.
Okay. And Walt Disney had already been established, but they weren't doing what they're doing now, but they were definitely able to manipulate And well, that was before Star
this
Wars.
was
That was
the
before
reason
Star
this
Wars and
panel-
all these other
keep
Star
in
Trek
mind-
and stuff.
Right. Keep in mind the reason this panel took off or was demanded by the public was this was the year after the Washington, D.C. UFO event.
Oh, where they were right above the Capitol. That's right. So because so many people witnessed it, they were like, dude, what? We need to do something.
Right. People kind of demanded a like public investigation or answers to some degree. And so they went in, they looked at Blue Book's files,
But
and
they
came back
They
saying it's not a threat, but it is a threat for our communications.
right. I was gonna say like that's they almost immediately decided that they need to. It wasn't a public thing anymore, or they weren't working for the public good anymore. They were like, okay, let's keep the secret.
Yeah, yeah.
Even though they were they were infiltrated by government actors in the early stages of whatever this Robertson panel was. I'm assuming it wasn't like a legit civilians investigation, right?
No. I mean, civilians in that they weren't military personnel. They were like PhDs or whatever, like people from
but they've
academia.
got affiliations and they've got
right. Like they're given access to look over these files, but which Blue Book files did they actually get access to? Right.
yeah, and at the time, and we had no internet. There's no way to verify or at least cross-reference all the information you're getting. You're just assuming it's correct.
Right. All right. So he kind of goes on to talk about, he talks about the Nimitz and the Roosevelt UAP sightings.
Okay.
And he talks about being brought into AAWSAP, or well, ATIP at the time with Lue. And Lue kind of briefed him on what was happening. And Lue gave him evidence that Mellon says was enough that like completely convinced him. Like as far as Mellon was concerned, is incontrovertible proof is what Lue had access to in ATIP.
So Mellon came into ATIP after being.
So Lue, we'll go over this through the course of the book, but Lue gets recruited into AAWSAP.
Which is the earlier program, right?
Right. Is the earlier program. AAWSAP later becomes ATIP. Around that time, Lue is like moving up the ranks and it's kind of his baby. And then Lue starts looking for ways to like escalate his findings
Further up the chain
of command to bring it to the attention of the Secretary of Defense.
I see.
In searching for a way to do that, he's looking for connections. That's when his connection to Chris Mellon comes in.
Okay.
And then he briefs Chris Mellon, basically just gives him the rug down, gives him the proof, and then Chris Mellon is just like blown away. He was already interested in the topic, which I think he talks about in this. But anyway, I say all this because like once he knows for a fact that it's true, as a military intelligence professional, your job is to protect national security.
First and foremost, yeah.
Your job is to address threats to the United States. And these things clearly
show the capabilities of being a threat.
Right.
Whether they are a threat at this time.
I think Lue words it in the book at some point in a way like there's two components to a threat, right? There's ability and there's intent. So they clearly have the ability. Right. We have no idea if they have the intent.
Right.
But we have to act as though
they do have it.
Not necessarily as though they do, but because they have the capability, we have to take that incredibly seriously and find out about the intent.
Right. Do everything we can to find out.
Right. So anyway, he talks about being upset about it because our country has a history of some very key intelligence failures that have kind of like shaped our history. And he mentions Pearl Harbor. and 9/11, the Afghanistan war, all of these things are things we had information about that was not acted on that caused these things to happen. And he said, if we are not going to address this, then we are
in the middle
committing another intelligence failure, and we don't know how it will fail, but we are creating the potential for another giant failure.
Right. By not getting ahead of this and being
not
aware
taking
of
it seriously, not kicking it up the chain of command, not dedicating resources to understanding it.
Right.
So that kind of like leads into some of this next clip I have here. So he says, as the reader may know, it's not unusual for Russian bear bombers to occasionally fly across the Bering Strait towards Alaska, prompting U.S. fighter aircraft on strip alert to launch and intercept them in international airspace. The moment these lumbering Russian aircraft are detected, intelligence reporting mechanisms are immediately activated to ensure America's military and civilian leadership is promptly notified. These bear bomber intrusions are typically also reported in the press. By contrast, off our East Coast, America was suffering recurring violations of restricted U.S. airspace week after week, month after month, without any formal intelligence reporting or press coverage. In fact, I was shocked to learn that North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD, responsible for guarding North American airspace, was not even notified of these intrusions. Whether it was Russia, China, or someone else, this was clearly unacceptable. It quickly became clear that when it came to UAP, the mighty U.S. intelligence apparatus was paralyzed and ineffectual. I could not help but be reminded of the fabled story of the Emperor's New Clothes. Only in this instance, instead of the rank and file pretending to admire clothing that didn't exist, some defense and intelligence personnel were pretending not to notice advanced aircraft that plainly did exist. In fact, encounters with these craft were becoming so commonplace, one military airbase began posting warnings of the potential for mid-air collisions in an area that should have been devoid of any non-U.S. military aircraft.
Interesting. Yeah, so that reminds me of like when David Fravor was talking about it was what's the other guy on the East Coast? What's the other guy's name? Not David.
Not David Fravor.
And not David Grush, but the other guy.
David, no, it was like Robert. No, what's the guy's name? He has a podcast now, I think. Ryan Graves.
Ryan Graves, that's it. Yeah. He was talking about how they were getting alerts on their pages as pilots were going out. Mm-hmm. That be careful. Like they were having to put it out themselves. Command wasn't telling them to.
Right.
They were interpersonally telling each other, "Hey, look out! Those things are out there again. Like,
right.
Just be aware that
don't run into one.
Don't run into them."
Yeah.
It's so fascinating that they are doing all this and they are experiencing all this, but there's no formal structure around just letting it out or even reporting it to their own superiors.
Like even within their chain of command.
Yeah, even within their own thing, like having some sort of, conversation about it.
For NORAD not to be getting notifications of these things seems totally crazy to me.
That's
like I can understand NORAD getting these notifications and then filing them away or ignoring them.
But not getting them at all?
Yeah, that's nuts. That's crazy.
That shows you that there is a culture of just not reporting for whatever reason.
Right, which goes back to that Robertson panel.
Exactly.
And its recommendations that this would overwhelm our communications, so instead, we should ignore it.
Until it's a problem.
Right. Until it's too late, like Pearl Harbor or 9/11.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's take our second break and we'll continue on.
Sounds good. See you in a bit.
Oh, yeah. This is TJ McNulty Moment.
Couple of years, and can we take a moment to realize that you and I are just a phase in a series through our lives? 'Cause you'll change and I'll be that one who gets to love you while it lasts and gets the privilege to see the days go by and these feelings grow apart. We'll say goodbye to the emotions in our heart. We'll gather wisdom and maybe we will see that we were too young to read love, and this wasn't meant to be.
Welcome back.
All right. Hope you enjoyed that. From TJ McNulty called Moment.
Yeah. From
We're
his
back.
album Harmony.
We are back for segment 3 of episode 38.
39.
39. We're on 39. Oh,
Yeah. Oh, I had
Pushing
this named
40.
wrong. Cool. All right. So, we had left off talking about NORAD not getting the info and stuff like that. And I had talked about like him discussing the different intelligence failures. So then he goes on to this segment here. Further, as was the case with the Al-Qaeda attack of September 11th, 2001, it was obvious that multiple agencies and departments had significant UAP information they were not sharing. For example, U.S. Navy aviators were routinely encountering UAP off the East Coast in designated military training areas. However, U.S. Air Force F-22s with even more powerful sensors were using the same training areas. they had to be detecting these strange craft as well. It was clear that the Air Force pilots were either afraid to report what they were seeing, or the Air Force was refusing to share their reports. Meanwhile, the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, the Central Intelligence Agency, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the National Security Agency also appeared to have important UAP data that they were not sharing. This seemed to be a clear echo of the problem that had proven so costly on September 11, 2001, when the intelligence community failed to prevent the deadly terrorist attack that destroyed the World Trade Center. Lue and I were both determined to do whatever we could to prevent another disastrous intelligence failure.
I will say, not to go into 9/11 too much, but it's not spoke about all that publicly, or at least in many circles, of how much of a failure it was on the intelligence side during the attack.
It came out during the 9/11 Commission.
Yeah, but how that was much later.
Yeah.
It was far enough in the future, or far enough, removed from the actual event that people weren't as up in arms about whatever, because we were already involved in a war at that point.
Right.
We had already gone and started doing whatever, all the whole war on terrorism stuff. So it was far removed enough to where people weren't up in arms, and there was very little internet and mass communications from around the world at the time too. So they had it was kind of like right before what we are experiencing now with the internet became mainstream, where we had all this ability to communicate and share stories and share videos and audio and all these different things. So they were able to get away with not reporting it as soon as they had the information, right?
But if you are unaware on the 9/11 front, yes, it was essentially, there were multiple intelligence agencies who had word of what was about to happen, and they failed to communicate what they knew to other intelligence and other government agencies that were in a power to do something about it.
Right.
That's kind of was the justification behind the restructuring of a bunch of the intelligence agencies under DHS.
Right. So it had some sort of like reporting, the ability to report it, and that reporting to whatever centralized agency would be able to be disseminated between all the different 3-letter acronyms.
Right. So yeah, he kind of goes on. I'm not going to cover any more of his clips from that, but he goes on to talk about him and Lue's attempts to bring attention into the Pentagon leadership. They tried to do it through the proper chain of command, and they kept meeting resistance, and it's that ultimately led to Lue's decision to resign in protest and become a whistleblower in order to bring the attention to the public, so that
it would force their hand
to address the issue. And yeah, we'll go into detail about all the events that lead up to that. That's like towards the end of the book when he actually details his part of that experience. So I didn't think we needed Chris's coverage of that so much. Right. And he spent some time talking about like how, like, since Lue has gone public, how much impact that has had on the public discussion around UAP.
Definitely had a big impact on our discussions around UAPs. Him and Fravor and David, what's the other David? Grush. And Ryan Graves. And this To the Stars Academy and all the stuff that they're putting out. And yeah, it's definitely informed the people who want to know more.
All right, so I'm going to read Lue's author's note here, which is just his quick little encapsulation of why he titled the book what it is.
Okay.
I think it's a nice little piece here.
And real quick, the name of the book is Imminent.
Imminent. Inside the Pentagon's Hunt for UFOs.
Okay.
You may be wondering why I titled the book Imminent. The word itself is sometimes associated with another word, threat. Although at first glance, this may appear that this book focuses on the potential threat of an unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP, or UFOs in the vernacular, that is not my intent. According to some of the common definitions of the word imminent is usually means something is about to happen, or impending, or inevitable. This is precisely why I chose the title. Regardless of whether one believes the UAP represent a threat to our national security, or on the contrary, perhaps UAP represent a new opportunity for our species. We are at the point where the reality of UAP is now upon us. The word imminent can mean many things depending on who you ask. Given the fact that Congress is now taking this topic seriously, one may presume that the conversation about UAP is now imminent as the national discussion. Some of the theological communities may view the topic as requiring imminent dialogue as a new paradigm emerges for humanity, while others may view UAP as being the beginning of a new imminent worldview about our place in the universe. And for many in the UFO community, they may see this as a sign of imminent government disclosure about non-human intelligence. Ultimately, I leave it up to you, the reader, to decide what imminent means to you. Maybe after reading the book, you'll walk away with a new meaning for yourself.
Or all the above, right?
Right.
All of the different emanations. I don't know how, what's the...
Emanations, I like that. Yeah. So personally, I think the paradigm for humanity, so like on the religious and historical view.
Spiritual stuff too.
Yeah. That's part of what I'm super interested in.
Yeah.
I'm also super interested in the imminent addressing of this topic that the scientific community is increasingly coming on board with.
Yeah, getting more qualified eyes to look at the information.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good emanation.
Yeah. Like it's imminent that at some point this topic will have to even break the barrier of their skepticism as a whole, like as a collective. But right now there's like the brave few who will take it seriously, but it's not part of the academic zeitgeist, as it were.
Well, it is a good title. I'll give them that.
Yeah. So it's a good framing for, what's going on.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to read his introduction, which is pretty short. And I think it will make sense to you why.
Okay.
In late 2008, I began a new job at the Pentagon after several tours with other U.S. intelligence agencies. Shortly thereafter, my life changed forever when I was recruited into a strange and highly sensitive U.S. intelligence program, unlike any I had ever been a part of. The program investigated the global mystery that is the unidentified anomalous phenomenon, or UAP for short, also known to many as UFOs. For nearly a decade, I found myself on the front lines of the biggest paradigm shift in human history and learned the reality of our place in the universe. Unidentified craft with beyond next generation technology, including the ability to move in ways that defy our knowledge of physics and to do so within air, water, and space. Having been operating with complete impunity over all the world since at least World War II. These craft are not made by humans, Humanity is in fact not the only intelligent life in the universe, and not the alpha species. Yes, I know that's going to take a bit of time to process, but buckle up. There's a lot more. UAP and the non-human intelligence controlling them present at very best a serious national security threat issue, and at worst, the possibility of an existential threat to humanity. Although I had plenty of jobs that challenged me personally and professionally, this job transformed my life. It changed the way I looked at the universe and humankind's place in it. It changed my view of how one becomes a good father, husband, and son. It also reminded me of what it means to be a patriot and to truly serve your country. The obligation we in the government have to always act in the best interest of the American people, regardless of the personal stakes. Over time, my colleagues and I gained insight into how these mysterious UAP operate and into the intentions of the non-human intelligence behind them. While there are valid reasons for secrecy around some aspects of UAP, I do not think humanity should be kept in the dark about the fundamental fact that we are not the only intelligent life in the universe. The United States government and other major governments have decided that citizens do not have a right to know. But I could not disagree more. You might be thinking this all sounds crazy. I'm not saying that it doesn't sound crazy. I'm saying that it's real.
Boom. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, having to wrestle with that understanding that we're not alone and we're not the most intelligent living beings in the universe, and that we've been contacted and whether we've been fully contacted like you might expect in like a science fiction novel, or if we've just brushed by, like they've just brushed by us, and you know, maybe we've recovered craft, maybe we haven't. It does seem like if we've had direct contact and conversations with these beings, it seems weird that they would just allow a government to, I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on what their structure is in their society, but it seems weird to just like only show your face to the intelligence communities around the world. Like,
yeah, but what about all the experiencers?
That's true. That's true. And I'm not trying to discount anything they're saying, but you would assume
the Chris Bledsoes and such.
You would assume that they would do more if they have the type of technology we're talking about, and if it is in fact the overall goal to make contact,
right?
Whether it be slow, whether their plan is to do it slowly or not, you would think that there'd be more. And if it is slow and they want it to be drawn out and they want people to become more, you know, open to the idea of it before they were to show their face, whether it be for good or bad, right? You would assume that if it was for bad, they would have just done it already, right? Whatever it is that their intention was. If they're coming here to do something nefarious, I would assume that they would, unless they're doing it now and whatever's happening in the world in a larger scale or behind the scenes or this and that are exactly what they're planning to do. But it just seems so drawn out that since World War II, at least since World War II, we've been having contact. Mm-hmm. Maybe longer. And if it is longer, like we're talking about really slow operations here, like they're working on a completely different time scale where they don't care how long it takes, but or they just don't want the contact to happen, or they don't want the public to know. Whatever it is that they're looking for or doing is not something that they need people to know or want people to know about.
Yeah, well, maybe their purposes here have something other than to do with what we
they're more
think
neutral.
of them being here.
They're
like maybe we're
more neutral.
Or maybe we're a
actually
way
up there.
station or a refueling station, you know. Maybe their aircraft runs on the water and they come in and suck up water out of the ocean and then bounce.
Yeah,
You know?
or it is like what we've heard with you know, what's written on the clay tablets, and that
Or like Bashar's story.
Yeah, or we were actually engineered by these beings at one point, or other beings, whether it's them or not. And there's probably multiple. If there's one,
there's no reason to believe that if there's one, that there would only be one.
right. If there's one other than us, that means there's probably more than one.
Yeah.
That's
It's
my view.
There's definitely more than one.
Yeah.
If there's more. If
Exactly.
there's one.
If there's even one other
Yeah.
intelligent being in the universe, there's more than one for sure.
That is if they don't come from the same background we do. Like
Right.
if they're both, if they,
Or they don't
like
live here.
us are native to Earth originally, but have moved out, right?
Or
But
they're
come
still
back to
native.
refuel.
Or they're still native.
Or they're
like-
still native, but like I'm just saying, if their evolution happened on this planet, then it is still an open question whether there are others.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's true. But even still, if they're able to...
I don't think so, but
Right,
just as far as what the logic proves out.
I would say based on the abilities of these craft, and if we are able to... If we are able to understand or verify that there is another living intelligent species that lives here or did live here, and they're able to go and explore the universe, that still tells me that it's possible. And that it's possible that other species may be out there in the universe, whether they're able to travel to far distances or not. Still, you know, it's still, you know, parts of that don't make sense, like the ability to move that far without affecting your biology or whatever, and like going through the radiation, unless they were talking about wormholes where you're connecting points in space.
Yeah, or you're just sort of outside of the influence of space and time when you're traveling in some sort of warp bubble.
Right. Which is basically the same thing in my view.
Right.
But
without needing a pre-constructed wormhole to...
And if previous humans are able to do that, it's likely other species, given hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years of evolution, are able to do the same thing.
Right. As long as we have... See, right now we have an N of 1, as they call it in science, right? Which is we have a example group to study of 1, which is life on Earth. And specifically human life on Earth as far as intelligent species. If they were shown to have been like a formerly evolved humanoid who comes back here to refuel, but like maybe is stationed off somewhere else in the solar system. Let's just say that as a hypothetical. So maybe they're not from some another star system. But they come back, they gas up, they fuel up, they mine, whatever, and then they kick those resources back out to the asteroid belt or to Europa or wherever the hell they're staying. That gives us at least... That still only gives us an N of 1 as far as life on planets, but it gives us an N of 2 for intelligent species. And if that is the case, that completely changes the calculus on like the Drake equation.
Yeah.
Then we know that species are much more likely to evolve to become intelligent if it happened twice on Earth.
Right. Over whatever period of time.
Right. A short enough time period that they're still around.
Yeah. I mean, if they have the technology we're talking about, then they likely are, whatever they're doing, maybe interfacing with time itself, and it's possible that whatever they are is our future self or our past self, right? Like if you think about that movie Time Machine, where he goes back far enough to see the world having been restarted, or having he goes far forward enough to see humans back in the position of being hunter-gatherers, living off scraps and trying to like fend for themselves again, you know, like
Right.
history being cyclical or time being cyclical in that nature.
Yeah. Huh.
I like that movie, Time Machine. It's an older movie,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I like that movie.
Didn't he like go? He goes way, way far.
He goes way far forward, like I don't remember, thousands of years in the future,
Or millions even.
maybe
yeah.
even, yeah.
Well, yeah, because I remember like
But they're still humans.
I think like as he's fast forwarding, like a comet hits and like
Yep.
everyone gets wiped out,
Yep.
and then like a new species like evolves and a new
it's-
civilization.
Like humans do survive in a way,
Yeah.
but they are so like they are basically restarted from Adam and Eve, you know, where it's
Right.
like a tribe has to like bring itself out of the brink of extinction, and they're living on cliff sides in a canyon to like survive, but there's dangers at night, you know, and he has to live with these
right.
people in the middle of the night, or
That's right.
go through all the experiences that they have, because that's when all the dangerous animals come out and they have to hide, so they live on the walls and caves.
Isn't that what's the dude's name? Is that Guy Ritchie, the actor from Memento? Guy something. I don't know if Guy Ritchie's the actor or the director.
Guy Pearce.
Guy Pearce, that's what I meant. That's him, right?
It's him. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He's the main protagonist in that movie.
It's a cool
It's
movie.
and it also in that movie
I haven't seen that in a long time.
They
wanna
addressed
rewatch
the
that.
stationary aspect of time travel, where he's affixed to a place as he's time traveling. It's not like he gets up
So
in
he
some
stays
ship.
rooted to the earth.
He stays rooted to the earth, and as time goes on, you see the
landscape.
landscape change, and things are changing around him. And when he comes back, when it's still like a modern time, or like maybe even like back in the day, like he's in the same place he was before, but now it's like the
He's like
window
up on a cliff.
That one, he's up on one of them. He's up on a cliff, and one of them he's like in the front windows of a department store, and then like one of them he's like in a parking lot or something. Like I can't remember exactly what it was. I need to watch the movie again. It's been a few years, but yeah, he's fixed to the earth in this machine that he sits in, and as the machine is working, he sees everything. I don't know if he sees it, but we see everything changing around him as he's in one spot.
He does.
Yeah. And so when he comes out in that time, like he had watched the entire earth blow, and I think the machine broke at that point. That's why he was stuck in that. Like the machine had
Like
malfunctioned.
something dramatic happened that caused him to like retreat into the machine.
Yep. Yep. And then it broke during that process, and it sent him millions of years in the future.
Was it that, or was like he hurt and he like sends it forward, but he like passes out or something?
Something like that.
Yeah.
But no, I do remember the machine being broken because he was stuck in that time.
Right.
For a long that was the majority of I would say the larger majority of the movie was
that
in
super
that
distant
super far
future.
time when it's back to the hunter gatherers trying to survive, and he was stuck there for whatever reason. Maybe it broke during when he came out. I can't remember exactly
I can't remember either.
but it's still a fascinating movie. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's a good
The
movie.
Time Machine. All right,
Guy
y'all.
Pearce.
Let's take another break here, and then I'll hop into the first chapter of this book. We've done 2 segments and I haven't even gotten to the first chapter. I love it. I knew it would be good discussions.
Yeah, I love this stuff.
All right, we'll be back. Welcome back
All right.
to the final segment of Duality. All right, so
Chapter 1.
chapter 1. All right, so I'm like picking certain chunks out of here to quote, but so I'll kind of just give you an idea of some of that, like what he's talking about in the areas I'm not quoting. Okay. So the basic history of it, of Lue and his background. Obviously, he's got a whole background in the military, but in 2008, he took a job at the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. That's OUSDI.
Okay.
And he explains that kind of how the Pentagon works a lot of times is like you'll have like a particular job, but sometimes you'll get another job that like rests on top of your other job. So you're kind of wearing multiple hats.
I see. Yeah. So he's kind of a consultant for multiple things, or he's got his hands.
He's
in
got multiple
positions.
responsibilities, even though like his original responsibility is for OUSDI in 2008. Okay. In 2009 is when he gets approached for AAWSAP.
Okay.
Which stands for Advanced Aerospace Weapons Systems Applications Program. And it's AAWSAP that later will morph into and become ATIP when the AAWSAP funding gets pulled.
Okay. But it just kind of folds into a new program, really.
Yeah, well, like Lue and his people, they sort of like rescue it. Like they don't want the work to be destroyed. So they find their own funding sources and their own way to like compartmentalize and like create this new program.
Okay. But using the same information they were gathering on during AAWSAP.
Right.
I see.
Whereas AAWSAP was, it was officially funded by Congress.
Right.
Whereas ATIP was more like a ragtag sort of thing that they generated their own funding wherever they could figure out ways to pull from.
Okay. So
or in that same sense where they would like work extracurricularly, they would have their main desk job and then they would like in their free time be working on their ATIP stuff, right?
Okay.
In order to keep it alive.
I see. But the funding was largely from like civilian people, or
well, it was from no. It was like there's
or like companies, or
so
as far as
Congress funds the Pentagon, and there's all sorts of like earmarks for different funding and whatnot, right?
Okay.
And then once that funding gets distributed, some of it is meant to funnel into other projects at the discretion of people within the military, within the Pentagon.
The leaders of the funds that, and they're like, yeah.
So it's meant to be like divvied up and like funded into other things.
And so they found a way to get.
They found ways to like get certain bits of funding
from like a Christopher Mellon type who might have the ability to push some funding towards things.
Yeah, not him, but like stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, so where I'm going to pick up is in 2009. I'm going to cover this first section where he's actually getting recruited for AAWSAP.
Okay.
Excuse me. So he says, my assistant knocked on my door again and introduced me to Jay Stratton and his colleague, who I'll call Rosemary Kane. Looking up from my coffee, I saw a serious male in his mid-30s, clean-shaven with piercing eyes. Jay looked familiar, but I hadn't met him before. He wore a fine suit, but seemed out of place in it. Instinctively, I pegged him as a guy who'd be more comfortable with a machine gun and a bandolier around his chest. Picking out a fellow operator is a game for those of us who've done the work. Something goes awry when one of us dons a suit. It's like forcing a German shepherd into a doggy tuxedo sweater. They can wear it, but it's unnatural. Rosemary struck me as cool, calm, and beautiful. Only later would I learn that she also spoke fluent Russian and was a former intelligence case officer. Rosemary was one of the few intelligence professionals who would have been just as comfortable on the cover of Vogue magazine as sporting camouflage and wielding an AK-47. She could work in any environment, and that's what made her lethal. Good morning, Jay said. We've heard a lot about you. It's good to finally meet. Without realizing, I acknowledged them with a single-syllable grunt. My apologies, I added. I haven't had enough coffee this morning. Ah, Cafe Bustelo, Rosemary said. I love Cuban coffee. I thought, how does she know I'm drinking that brand of coffee? The can was nowhere to be seen. A lucky guess or something more? Had these two strangers been investigating me? Okay, I said. What did I do now? Half joking, but not really. I'm sorry, Rosemary said. You're obviously here for something, so what did I do now? Jay and Rosemary glanced at each other. The blue credentials around their necks were the giveaway that they were both government intelligence officials. You didn't do anything wrong, Jay said. Rosemary approached my desk. We're here to talk to you about something very important, a matter of national security. Nothing new for me. Everything I did touched on national security. Still, my visitors had piqued my curiosity. A short while later, fresh Cuban coffee in hand, Rosemary said, we're interested in your counterintelligence and security experience for a highly classified program led out of our office at DIA.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So they're
sort of casing him.
Yeah, so they're trying to recruit him because of his intelligence and security experience.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But they're not giving on to like what
it is yet.
Right.
Yeah. They're kind of keeping
clearly
it
already been like checking him out and whatnot.
They clearly knew enough about him.
Right.
That they knew his brand of coffee without any obvious signs of what brand of coffee he was drinking.
Right. So that's like telling him we're checking you out.
Yeah. Without explicitly saying it. Yeah.
So he goes on to say that they didn't reveal the nature of the program. They had only said unconventional technology is what their deal with. He said they met twice more at the office over coffee. And then we'll fast forward to like after those next two meetings, they finally bring him in to meet
where they work.
Right. So we'll go to that.
Okay.
Weeks later, the basic vetting hurdle apparently cleared. They invited me to meet their colleague. The meeting details were as mysterious as the job itself. They instructed me to arrive early, park in a lot across the street from a seemingly civilian office building in Virginia. I would show my credentials to the second security guard, not the first, and take the elevator to the 10th floor. This struck me as a bit over the top. Ever since 9/11, security had been tightened, but this is usually little reason to pretend you're James Bond while parking your black Crown Victoria. On the 10th floor, I found myself in a long, blank hallway with a security door and a camera on the far end. Rosemary answered my knock. She offered me coffee and escorted me through the door into a government cubicle farm full of people working. Finally, in a glass office space along the far wall, I met Dr. James Lakatsky. He was a bona fide rocket scientist with a doctorate in engineering and looked every bit the part. Glasses and disheveled hair, a loosened tie. He knew it all, from the brute force mechanics of Scud missiles to the intricacies of first and second stage solid fuel rocket booster engines. I later learned that he was one of our government's top rocket scientists. "Call me Jim," he said. In a calm voice, he told me AAWSAP worked on sensitive aviation technology and needed a senior counterintelligence agent to lock down all intel about the program from the usual antagonists, foreign adversaries. They employed many outside contractors, but Jim deliberately handpicked a small cadre of intelligence officers to manage and oversee the work performed by the contractors. Nestled deep inside DIA, a member of the U.S. intelligence community, the IC, AAWSAP drew its authority directly from Congress, according to Jim. Nothing I'd heard up until now sounded unusual, except that I still didn't know what the program actually did. After a brief discussion about my experience protecting advanced aerospace technology, Jim paused. The silence between us grew. He then asked, "What do you think about UFOs?" What the? I thought. Is this a joke? Is he testing me in some way? "I don't," I said. Jim pounced. "What? You don't believe in You don't believe UFOs are real?" "I didn't say that. What I mean is I have no reason to think about them. All of my work has focused on other issues. None of my professional projects had ever touched on the topic, nor was I particularly interested. In my personal life, I had never been fascinated by the topic. I never got into Star Wars or Star Trek, and I hadn't even seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind." Jim peered at me over his glasses. "That's fair, but don't let your analytical bias get the best of you. You might see things that will change your current perception of the universe, of reality. You must be prepared to change your opinion in the face of new data and evidence." It's interesting intro.
Yeah. Yeah, he touched on that a bit in the Joe Rogan episode too, where he talked about this kind of meeting. I don't know about this specific meeting, but he talked about like his kind of recruitment into the AAWSAP and stuff. Yeah, and he made it sound like he's like, yeah, I'm like, that was the opposite, furthest away from being a believer or even ever wanting to think about the UFO UAP topic.
Yeah, he wasn't some sci-fi nerd.
Yeah, he's not somebody who's like spent his life like, yeah, sure, I'm a government contractor, but I really believe in aliens and I want to eventually to get to that. Like, it's not, that doesn't seem like it's his story. You know, that could be changed. That understanding of him could be changed if some other information came out about that he was a huge science nerd or, you know, Star Wars nerd as a kid, but But yeah, interesting.
What he may or may not have known is that I did have some experience in looking beyond the average person's understanding of reality, which I'll get to later. He explained that AAWSAP focused on unusual phenomena and investigated unidentified aircraft, specifically ones that seemed to display beyond next generation technology and capabilities. What we now call unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAP, or what were long referred to as UFOs. Jim explained that for decades, civilians, military personnel, and law enforcement officers had reported strange sightings across the world. And there was actually data to support what they saw. Data collected by the same intelligence gathering systems used to keep our country safe from our adversaries, arguably the most advanced in the world. Jim emphasized that what they focused on didn't conform to physics as we understood it. My head spun. Holy hell, was this for real? Jim suggested that I take some time to think. If I wanted to know more, we'd do a second chat. It struck me as the most low-key, matter-of-fact job interview I'd ever done. As I stood to leave, Jim offered one more piece of advice. Word of warning, he said. If you want to work with us, you can't be committed to anything. I mean, any preconceived notions. I don't think he smiled the whole time we were together. He was dead serious. And then there's some redacted lines there.
Is that
he actually
in his
keeps
book?
all the redactions in the book.
Wait, these are redactions of his story?
Yeah, by the DOD.
Interesting.
Yeah. But so one of the interviews I heard him on recently, he was talking about how when he was writing this book, what he wanted to do was keep like 90 or so % to like what he knew was like totally safe, totally within what he knew he could talk about.
Right.
And he wanted to sort of strategically push that boundary just a little bit for two reasons. One, if the DOD happened to not redact it,
Then it's out there.
there's more new information out there.
Mm-hmm.
And two, when the DOD does redact things,
It's obvious that there's something specific that they're trying to redact.
he
right?
planned from the get-go to like actually print the redactions.
Yeah.
So you actually see the lines redacted when you read the book. And when you listen to the audiobook, it says redacted by the Department of Defense. Like he wants you to know, like, here's where I am in my story.
And this
And
part is
then
now redacted.
There's a redaction. So
Yeah.
he's doing it for also the ability for people to read into those redactions and see the types of things that the DOD is redacting. And also it's sort of catching the DOD in a catch-22 where the fact that they're
Gotta
redacting
decide.
things on this is
Shows.
like confirming.
Yeah. I mean, the skeptic, right, might say he's just adding redactions. Or he's specifically putting in classified material that has nothing to do with the topic so that they have to redact it, and then he has an ability to say, look, they redacted it, to add some level of I guess just add some level of confirmation, right? People might say, oh, he left it in here, it's redacted. That's what the skeptic might say, right?
Sure.
But still, it's interesting.
Yeah, totally.
And like we've talked about before, like we take all of this with a grain of salt too. Like we know that he is a government agent and
An
depending
intelligence
on-
guy.
and a counterintelligence guy. Like he
Right.
understands what it takes to hide this type of information. Mm-hmm. So it's fair to say what the skeptics might say when it comes to this stuff, but even still, like the fact that,
I mean, at the end of the day, it's still a story coming from a person who you have to kind of believe.
because who else
You
you
also
get the information
have
from?
to believe. I mean, at least in his case, he's got multiple people in his network who have also come out and corroborated.
Yeah.
He's also responsible for declassifying the Tic Tac and the Go Fast and the Gimbal videos, which are all written about in this book. The story about how they became
Oh, okay, cool.
declassified, which is a really interesting story when we get to it. But yeah, he didn't actually intend for them to be totally publicly declassified, and it was a funny story. Yeah,
Yeah, I would want to hear that.
yeah, yeah. So obviously he goes home, he talks to his wife, he can't actually give details, but he's like, hey, I'm looking at bringing on some extra responsibility at work. He goes and he talks to his longtime intelligence insider friend, one of his best friends, this guy named John Robert. Talks to him about the strangest interview he got. Turns out John Robert is the one who actually recommended Lue to them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So what was John's insight on whether he should take it or not? Or did he know
thought he
some of
was
the information too, or
uniquely
no?
qualified for the position because of his counterintelligence experience.
Did he know the job title and what they were asking of him?
Yeah.
Or, so
Yeah.
his friend did know.
He did, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how deep he knew, but he at least knew what the program was and what they were doing.
I see.
I'm not sure, like, the depths of his knowledge on the inside of the details of the program.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure they compartmentalize it.
Right.
So he might have been a he might have been a surface level initiate,
Yeah.
right? Enough to be able to help recruit others.
So then he has another meeting with Jim. The guy
After.
we just were introduced to, the guy who gave him his interview, right?
And this is when he accepted the job, or
No, he just has another meeting with him. And he's
Okay.
talking more details. And Jim explains to him that the program under congressional authority was actually passed by a bipartisan group of senators. And it was Senator Harry Reid, Democrat from Nevada, Senator Ted Stevens, Republican from Arkansas, and Senator Daniel Inouye, Democrat from Hawaii. And then he gives a little blurb about each of the senators, but I wanted to show this little blurb he gives about Senator Stevens
Okay.
to give some like background on why these senators may have been pushing for this.
Okay.
So during World War II, Stevens had served as a pilot in the Army Air Corps, flying U.S. military cargo over the so-called hump of the Himalayas from India to China, where it could be used in the U.S. conflict with Japan. Jesus, I can't talk tonight.
Japan.
Japan. The Himalayas are the most imposing and most dangerous and arguably most isolated mountain chain in the world. Flying over them in 1940s aircraft would not have been a cakewalk. Stevens admitted openly that he had once seen a Foo Fighter while flying on a mission. That's the term Allied pilots in World War II used to describe strange aerial phenomena, strange balls of light, orbs that followed aircraft, objects that defied what our own aircraft could do. UAP, in other words.
Yeah. The World War II pilots, the Foo Fighters, yeah, that's basically UFOs during that time.
Right, that's the term.
That's the term they used, yeah.
And why
Especially
the band
within the military.
is called what they are.
Specifically within the military.
Right. So then after he talks to his wife about it and he calls Jim and he accepts the position. So then I'll go on to this next bookmark here. He says, this is like one of his first conversations with Jim, and he says, "Count me in." And so what Jim says to him is, "What we do here is very strange," Jim said. "You should be prepared for the possibility that some of the strangeness will impact your personal life. These portfolios are sticky." I frowned at that. Sticky. What a strange word choice. I knew what he meant by the word portfolio. A portfolio is a term borrowed from Wall Street to describe the entirety of a program, from soup to nuts, as they say. But I had never heard anyone use the word sticky to describe a portfolio. I had no idea what he meant to imply. Maybe he meant controversial. In retrospect, I should have asked.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine sticky being, as soon as you start sticking your head in something, it is now stuck to you. You're a part of that. So like you start poking into or reading about certain things and you can no longer detach yourself from that. It's a part of who you are. It's part of what you've accomplished. It's part of your portfolio is now all of the things that you do. That's what I imagine the stickiness of that being.
I won't spoil it then.
Okay. Am I close?
It's you're not totally far off. But
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
It's a good
cool.
theory. It's a good theory. All right, so
I love
yeah,
this stuff.
that's
Cool.
chapter
So
one.
we dipped our
and
toes in.
We just dipped our toe in here, and we got to the point where Lue is now part of
He's in it.
AAWSAP.
He's in it.
And the next couple chapters, the next chapter describes like one of his first meetings he had while he was at AAWSAP, and it's a really interesting chapter. He gets exposed to some interesting stuff, and we actually it's gonna take us into this whole like series of sightings in Brazil.
Oh, okay.
And
Argentina?
then- no. And then the next chapter after that, we're gonna go into his like military background and
What he was actually
his remote viewing
Oh yeah.
history. So,
Yeah, I'm excited for chapter 3. Yeah, so
so
next week,
that'll be our next show.
next week you'll hear more.
Yeah. So,
Cool.
what'd you think so far?
I like it.
It's pretty good, huh?
Yeah, I mean, we laid the groundwork, and clearly the conversations are going to be flowing from this one. So
Now, obviously, this is not intended to replace reading the book. This is meant to spark our having a conversation about it,
and hopefully
and your
Yeah.
interest in the book. So pick it up. We'll leave a link to his book. He reads his own audiobook too, so
cool.
it's really nice. I love when people do that.
I love it too. Yeah, nothing makes it better than hearing the actual person's voice,
Right.
unless they have a weird voice. I don't know.
And Lou's got a weird voice.
I don't know if I want to hear RFK read a
like.
book.
Ouch! But yeah, I feel you. I mean, the
Nothing
thing with
against the guy.
RFK's voice
Nothing
is
against
like
the guy.
you just give it a few minutes and like
You start
start forgetting that it's weird.
Yeah. No, that's true. But you got to get in it before you know, you got to listen to an hour or so. Like I listen to them on podcasts, and a lot of times it's because it's in the background of what I'm doing, and eventually you just stop. You start to slow your brain down to expect the words in a different time, right? So you start to, I don't know, become used to it.
Yeah. It only his like
Nothing
weird
against you, RFK.
idiosyncrasies where he like struggles a little bit more here or there will it like point it back out to me that like he doesn't talk normal. But
Yeah.
nah, he's cool. Anyway, this is just the beginning of this book. This will probably be the next handful of episodes while we go over and I think what we'll do too is as he brings up topics that we can learn about through other means, we'll use that as an excuse to go over those things.
Yeah.
So like later in the book when he goes over the
Specific cases or whatever.
yeah, like the Roosevelt case and the Nimitz case, like those will be a good episodes to actually show
Dive
those
into.
videos and like go into some of the interviews with David Fravor and Ryan Graves. And I always forget the lady's name who was the other pilot with
Oh yeah.
Brandon Graves. Ryan Graves? Yeah. Anyway,
There was the lady pilot that was with Fravor. Anyway,
she was with Fravor. Oh yeah.
Anyway, check us out on if you want to know when our episodes will be posted. We'll be posting that on Facebook and Instagram. Let everybody know when our episodes are live. YouTube, Rumble, pretty much anywhere you get audio format podcasts. Check out our website at dualitycheck.net. Send us an email if you want to get involved in the conversation, or you have a story, or you have a friend, or you have anybody we want to talk to, or whatever. Send us an email at host@dualitycheck.net, or give us a DM on any of the socials, or YouTube, or Rumble. Yeah, thanks for hanging out with us.
And we'll see you next week. Adios.
Later.